Hello and welcome to Need to Know, the programme that keeps you up to date on the big issues in the world of education. In this programme, we look at personalised learning and how it will affect teachers in the classroom. Here to help explain is Mike Baker. Deceptively simple question, what exactly does it mean?
Yes, deceptive is the right word, because a lot of people have very different ideas about quite what personalised learning is. I think if you go back to its origins, it might help a little bit. It was very much when New Labour came in, they very much talked about personalising the public services, making sure it wasn't one size fits all. This was very much a Tony Blair theme, and then that was picked up by David Miliband, who was then the schools minister, and he started to apply it to schools and started to talk about personalised learning, tailored learning. But I think there's still a lot of confusion. Let's hear some of the range of views that there are in education about quite what it means to them.
Well, for a long time, ever since David Miliband announced personalised learning, I think back in January 2004, no one knew what it was. It sounded wonderful, but it was either like socialism or conservatism. It meant different things to different people.
Yes, it sounds wonderful. Personalised learning, of course it's a good thing. It sounds wonderful, but the reality is, if you want to deliver personalised learning, you need one teacher for every child, which of course is impossible.
There are some people who will say that the concept of personalisation is very vague. I don't think it's vague, but I do think it's actually quite simple. It's about making sure that you know each child, know where they are in their learning, know where they could be, and know how to get them there, and work with the child and with their parents to achieve that.
That's still not very clear, is it?
No, it's not very clear, and I think it's still difficult to move towards a consensus on this. The trouble is it mixes up a couple of things. There's the politics that we've just talked about, but it also takes you back to something called child-centred learning, which goes right back to the 1920s, then implemented in schools after the Plowden Report of the 1960s, all about everything being focused around the child, their different learning styles and so on. Now, the trouble is, some teachers say that's great, that's what we would like to go back to. That's what they've never stopped, they say. But that's not what the government mean. They mean something rather more specific, more rigorous. Yes, some one-to-one tuition, but very tough standards still, and something that's more structured.
So it's a long-standing aspiration. How has it been updated for today?
Well, the Gilbert Review, which was led by the current head of Ofsted, Christine Gilbert, was given the task of providing clear guidance on what personalised teaching and learning might look like in our schools in 2020. In its report, 2020 Vision, it defined it as taking a highly structured and responsive approach to each child's and young person's learning in order that all are able to progress, achieve and participate. It went on to say it means strengthening the link between learning and teaching by engaging pupils and their parents as partners in learning. Now that means encouraging pupils to think about what and how they learn. If that's a bit long-winded, then as a shorthand, I suppose that last bit works well. Personalised learning is about making the learner a partner in the teaching and learning process.
And how has this been received?
Well, it's rather difficult because it's so difficult. It's like a jelly. It's hard to grasp and know quite what it is. Therefore, we've had a different range of opinion. No one's absolutely fully against it, but there have been concerns expressed by the Conservatives, for example. Let's hear from their spokesman, Nick Gibb.
The evidence is that the most effective way of imparting knowledge to children, for children to learn, is whole class teaching, with the teacher at the front and actually teaching the child. Now, not the whole time. Of course, there'll be children having to write essays and practice the mathematics that they've learned, or writing up an experiment on their own. But I do worry about these fads, that come from the education world. They've been around since the 1920s. It's nothing new about personalised learning or individualised learning. It's come around, these fads like theme-based learning, project-based. Every 5 or 10 years, they fail and then they reintroduce them again.
Is he right at all? Is this just the latest fad?
I think that's probably a bit harsh. It does feel a bit like some ideas coming back round again, but some people are trying to give a new gloss to it. Now, the teacher unions see it very much as about one-to-one tuition. Let's hear from John Bangs of the NUT.
We did a lot of work on the issue of personalised learning, and for us it means one thing and one thing only, and that is that there are young people during the course of their school lives who could do with individual one-to-one tuition and mentoring. And that at key points in their lives, having someone who's going to boost their confidence, who's going to come in and actually provide them with the additional skills and knowledge needed to clamber over the next hurdle, whether or not it's a public examination or whether it's some test or something like that, that really does work, and the evidence is there.
So does personalised really mean one-to-one attention?
Well, no, that's a rather specific interpretation of it. The government would say it's much more about involving the learner as a partner, but it's also very structured about catch-up classes and all the rest of it. Let's hear from Dawn Taylor, who looks after personalised issues at the schools department.
For me, personalisation really lies at the heart of our standards agenda and a drive to improve standards and to really, this is our opportunity to really go for world-class standards. If we don't focus on what each individual is capable of, and if we don't look for each child to make the progress that they really can, then we're never going to get anywhere near our really ambitious aspirations and goals for 2020.
So is there any kind of handbook, any kind of set of requirements like the national curriculum that can be used by all schools?
Well, there's nothing quite as specific as that, because personalised learning is all about adapting to the particular needs of learners at any given point, so it would defeat the purpose to have anything too rigid. The idea is that schools and teachers develop their own version of personalised learning. However, there are some key principles or features. So pupils are to be treated as partners in their learning, taking joint responsibility for designing their curriculum. They will have their own individual needs met both in school and with learning outside the classroom. And if they fall behind, they will be given the support needed to get back on track. Parents will be fully engaged in their child's learning. They'll be kept updated with all information about their child's progress and shown how they can support their child's learning. And they'll be given the chance to play a more active role in the school's daily affairs. Finally, teachers will have high expectations of every learner. They will use performance data from more highly attuned assessment to shape each child's learning. And they should be able to depend on support from non-teaching staff and other adults to provide a holistic, tailored learning experience for each child.
Interesting. So demanding for parents, very demanding for teachers.
Very demanding indeed, because you've got to attune the classroom and the curriculum to each individual child. But I think one thing to stress, there will of course be under these changes a lot more classroom assistance, and they'll be crucial in making sure that teachers are freer in order to design the curriculum, so not having to engage the whole class all the time. Let's hear from Dawn Taylor from the schools department again.
We are putting money in. Schools will already have personalised learning in their budgets. There's already been investment, and over the next 3 years, through the CSR period, we've got something like 1.6 billion will go into schools' budgets to help them deliver that. On top of that, there are other things that we're doing in central government to support personalised learning. So we're also, although it isn't about individual one-to-one support, that's clearly an element of it for some pupils. So we're developing programmes like Every Child a Reader, Every Child a Canter, and investing in those.
So how will personalised learning impinge on the highly sensitive area of testing and assessment?
Well, yes, this is where it gets really very interesting, because it has very big implications for the national curriculum and the national tests. Indeed, these have already been shaped by the thinking behind personalised learning. Let's start with assessment and testing. The idea here is that assessment should inform learning rather than being something that just comes at the end as a check, if you like, on what has been covered. In other words, formative assessment as well as summative assessment. So assessment for learning is a constant cycle of establishing where pupils are in their learning, clarifying where they should go next, and then helping them to achieve that learning goal. That's why we're seeing a movement towards testing when ready, or stage not age testing. The government is implanting this through the Making Good Progress pilots that are currently underway. Here's Dawn Taylor from the Department for Children, Schools and Families on how those pilots are developing.
Making Good Progress pilot includes a number of strands, and one of these is the assessment strand, which includes both assessment for learning to help improve teachers' assessment judgments, and single level tests. Single level tests have attracted a lot of attention, and rightly so, because ministers have said in the children's plan that if they prove successful in the piloting, they could replace national curriculum tests. They're more tests, but they're shorter tests. And we think that having tests throughout long key stages, and to be used when the pupil's ready to take them rather than at an arbitrary endpoint, is likely to actually be much more motivating for both pupils and teachers.
OK, that's assessment. Now, how does personalised learning affect the curriculum, given that teachers think the national curriculum is something of a straitjacket often?
Well, they do think that. That's absolutely true. However, we have seen some simplifying of the compulsory curriculum in an attempt to offer more flexibility. In another of these programmes, we looked in detail at the changes to the Key Stage 3 curriculum, for example, which offer much more freedom to teachers to personalise learning. Similarly, the 14 to 19 reforms that we covered in the Need to Know programme about diplomas will offer far more tailored pathways for learners. Add to this the greater use of ICT to create a virtual learning environment and greater use of project-based learning, and the experts say this will relieve teachers and learners of the straitjacket.
Now, the government said it's supporting teachers, and this news said there'll be more help for teachers in the classroom. How's that working out?
Well, yes, there will be more help because the use of classroom or teaching assistants is nevertheless rather a ticklish issue. It all goes back to the workforce remodelling project and the introduction of PPA time, that is planning, preparation and assessment, which is supposed to be about freeing teachers so they can assess each child's progress and tailor their learning plans. But it's not been easy, and there have been concerns from the unions that this inevitably means classroom assistants impinging on teachers' roles, something the government are very quick to refute.
I think that there is clearly a role for use of classroom assistants within the personalised learning agenda, and a role for ensuring that the classroom assistant and teacher work well together as a team. I wouldn't see in any sense that the personalisation agenda undermines the professionalism of the teacher in any way. I mean, absolutely, quite the reverse.
OK, so we've talked about the big structural changes, but practically speaking, how do you enable and encourage children to be partners in their own learning? Isn't that a bit ambitious?
It is ambitious, and of course in the end it'll be down to individual schools and teachers how they do it. I have been to see this in practice in some places, for example a school in Bristol where they were very good. They were very much engaging the pupils. They got in older pupils to talk to the younger pupils about what worked for them, how it didn't work, whether they like group learning or individual tuition, and fed that back to the teachers. So I think involving the students will be a big part of it. Let's hear on that issue from Clarissa Williams, the new president of the NAHT.
I think for too long in this country, education has been something that's been done to children. And I think that the more we involve children, obviously the questions we ask them and the more we educate them to be responsible in the way they respond is a really important life skill for them. I actually think that children have a lot to say, and certainly every time we've asked children in school to feed back on a learning experience, they've been incredibly constructive, and certainly we involve children in appointment of staff. We ask them what's gone well. The way we ask the questions and the way we show them how we want them to respond in terms of, you know, showing respect, and that's a mutual thing.
So will this approach make the necessary difference to improve learning, do you think?
It's very hard to say because everyone has a different idea about what personalised learning is, but I think one thing it will do, it should restore some of that professional autonomy to teachers, and that in itself should be quite motivating. So I think that's quite a hopeful sign, and certainly the Gilbert Review estimated it should radically transform education. So if they're right, it'll make a big difference, yes.
And that's what you need to know about personalised learning. For more information, go to our website. Until next time, from Mike and from me, goodbye.